Hello, grade 8. Nice to see you back to your geography class. And today we're going to continue our journey across Africa. But if last week we were talking about Africa in general, its physical geography, mountains, rivers, and climate and vegetation, then today we're only going to talk about a certain part of Africa, which is East Africa. For our work today, you will need to open your books on page 431, and if you do not have your hard copies of the books, you may download soft copies, the PDFs that I also sent to you, and at least you will be able to use the text from the PDF. Okay, so but before we start our class today, I would like you to look at this map. This map here and the map on page 430 in your book. Okay, so now you on that map on page 430 you will find the sub-region of East Africa. It's shown orange on your map. Okay, can you find it? Okay, the orange part of African map on page 430. Now, in your notebooks, you will write a list of the 10 countries included in that sub-region. The trick is that on the continent there are only 9 countries, right? And one country is entirely on the islands next to the continent. Okay, so look for 9 countries on the continent and 1 country in the sea. Okay, now as you made this list of 10 countries, please find those 10 countries on the map on this screen. You see, it is not very difficult because you have the names of countries on the map in the book. You have the names of countries on this white map. It is not blank, it is still white. Okay, now you're able to identify those 10 countries that we usually consider to be East Africa. Okay, now let's make it a bit harder. Here is the same map, but without names of countries. Okay, now try to find those 10 countries on this map as well. Okay, and also tell me what noticeable landforms you can see in East Africa. Remember last week's lesson about landforms and mountains and rivers, lakes and stuff. Okay, now you find out as many noticeable landforms as you can on this map. Okay, 10 countries. And now let's check if you are correct with your 10 countries on this map. Up, up. Enough, I guess. So, off we go. Important thing for you to know about this part of Africa is that usually scientists and scholars call this region the cradle of humanity, or the cradle of mankind. Okay, and this is Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania. Right now you will open your books on page 431 and you will read a paragraph, okay, a human perspective, okay, on this page, to learn why this place in East Africa is so important for you, for me, and for all people on the planet. So just press pause and you have like 2 or 3 minutes to read the paragraph. And when you're done, we'll continue. So, an important thing for you to know that East Africa includes, as you already noticed and you identify those countries on the map. So, it includes Burundi, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Seychelles. The Seychelles are the islands that you found in the sea, Somalia, Tanzania, and Uganda. These are the 10 countries that you were asked to find on the map. And another important thing for you to know is that scientists believe that the world's first humans lived there, in this area. Now, in the AD 100s, or in the 1st century, where today you may see Ethiopia on the map, there emerged the kingdom of Aksum. You will read now Trading Coast on pages 431, 432, and say what the foundation of Aksum prosperity was. Or in other words, why Aksum was so rich. Okay? And how the geographical location of the kingdom made it possible. Okay, you press pause, you read, then you think, and we will go on. So, I guess you're done reading. Now, what was the base, what was the foundation of Aksum's prosperity? Yes, it was trade. They were selling, they were buying, they were sending merchants in different parts of the countries and continents around them, and the location, the geographical location of this kingdom made it possible to trade with other kingdoms around them, because you see, this country had Red Sea next to it, and then Eritrean Sea, and Eritrean Sea was connected to the Indian Ocean, and from through Indian Ocean they could send ships even to India, or if they wanted maybe to China. Okay, so and via Red Sea they could travel north and trade with Egypt and countries of like Palestinian region. So trade was the key for the kingdom of Aksum. Now, we're not going to discuss or study the history of Africa in great details, but important thing for us to know is that later, beginning with the medieval ages like 15th, 16th century, and especially in the 19th century, Europe was fighting for African continent and for the things they could find there. You will watch this video about European colonization of Africa. Had you been given a say at the Berlin Conference, of which you will see in this video, so if you had been given a say or a speech at the Berlin Conference, what would you have told the representatives of European countries there? Okay, so scramble for Africa. Sounds funny, right?
Africa is a large continent home to immense culture and history. Surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Indian Ocean to the southeast, and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. It is the world's second largest and second most populous continent. It contains 54 countries and is extremely diverse in terms of ethnicity and language. The borders of these countries were largely decided by European nations during the late 19th and early 20th century in what is known as the Scramble for Africa. The Sahara is a defining feature of Africa, the largest desert in the world. The Sahara's sheer size and magnitude acted as a major obstacle for communication, trade, and exchange of ideas. However, there is evidence of Roman expeditions and explorations who were able to move across the desert and into the interior of Africa, with the aim to secure sources of gold, salt, and spices. For centuries, Arabs also maintained trade relations with the vast empires of West Africa, such as the Ghana and Mali Empire, establishing trade routes that secured gold, ivory, and slaves. The Portuguese began expeditions down the west coast of Africa in the 15th century, and history tells us of the profound effect that followed. During the 1480s, the explorer Diogo Coe was the first to establish contact with the Congo Kingdom, situated south of the Congo River. The Congo Kingdom was eager to make use of Portuguese teachers and craftsmen, and the Congo kings allowed Catholic missionaries to work among their people. The Portuguese traded guns, cloth, and other European luxuries for slaves who were captured by the Congo in wars against rival kingdoms. By the 17th century, Portugal and other European powers began to settle along the coast of Africa. Europeans would buy slaves in Africa, transport them to the Americas, and exchange them for valuable goods like sugar, coffee, and tobacco, which were then sold at premium prices in Europe. Arguably, between the 16th and 18th century, over 12 million Africans were enslaved and transported in harsh conditions to work on plantations in the Americas. In the south of Africa, the first European settlement was established by the Dutch East India Company, where merchants used the location as a waypoint for ongoing voyages to the Dutch East Indies. They came into contact with the Khoikhoi, a nomadic indigenous population of southwestern Africa, comprising of hundreds of clans. Over time, this settlement, known as the Cape of Good Hope, grew in size, resulting in the Khoikhoi losing land and cattle to the Dutch, who adopted the name Boer, meaning farmer. Due to a shortage of labour, the Dutch imported slaves from Mozambique, Madagascar, and many Indonesian islands. The Cape of Good Hope came under the control of the British during the Napoleonic Wars. The abolition of slavery ended slavery in the Cape in 1834. In 1835, the Boers embarked on the Great Trek, as the abolition of the slave trade resulted in financial catastrophe. As a result, Dutch citizens known as Voortrekkers moved further inland into Africa. They formed the Free Orange State and Transvaal, which was recognised by the British. In the north, France launched a war of conquest against Algeria in 1830, which would last until 1847. Meanwhile, in the United States, there was a movement to settle free-born blacks and freed slaves and transport them to Africa. Most whites, and later a small minority of blacks, believed that blacks would be better off in Africa. The American Colonization Society began transporting them to the closest point of Africa to establish a colony in 1822. By 1847, the settlers issued a Declaration of Independence and established the Independent Republic of Liberia. The construction of the Suez Canal in 1869 verified its importance as a route for trade with India and China. And in 1882, Egypt was occupied by British forces during the Anglo-Egyptian War, subsequently revealing the potential riches that Africa offered. There were several European explorers who explored the continent. Perhaps one of the most famous was David Livingstone, a Scottish missionary who attempted to convert the natives he encountered to Christianity and strove to find the source of the Nile. Henry Moult Stanley was famous for his exploration of Central Africa. He worked for King Leopold II of Belgium and helped map out the Congo region. So why were there no major explorations into the interior of Africa before this? Well, there were limited seaworthy rivers, tropical diseases, hostile natives, and weapons were not as advanced as they were in the 19th century. During the 19th century, most European powers experienced a dramatic growth of productivity triggered by industrialization. European countries overproduced goods and were consequently searching for new markets. Interest turned towards the acquisition of land in order to grow agricultural products for European markets. Europeans moved into the interior of Africa to extract raw materials such as rubber, palm oil, gold, copper, and diamonds. These natural resources made Africa a vital resource for the European economy. Between 1884 and 1885, the Berlin Conference was called by German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. 14 representatives of 14 European countries attended the conference, including Britain, Belgium, France, Portugal, and Italy. Notably, no African representatives were invited. The aim was to discuss how European countries would claim colonial land in Africa and avoid war between them. Each country affirmed that they would bring civilization in the form of Christianity and trade to each region they occupied. Although most of these African colonies were controlled by nations, the Berlin Conference allowed King Leopold II of Belgium to become the sole ruler of a vast area that is today the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The intent was to make it an area of free trade for all Europeans in Africa. However, in practice, Leopold kept out most European traders and granted concessions to various corporations to exploit the region's resources. In 1908, it was revealed that under King Leopold's instructions, native people of the Congo were forced to farm wild rubber as a form of tax payment to the colonial government. Those unable to carry out these instructions had their hand or foot severed. Once news of these atrocities became known, King Leopold was stripped of his colony, and the vast Congo region was ruled by the Belgian government. Understandably, Europe held the technological advantage. Bands of just a few hundred men, and barely a handful of machine guns, proceeded to overwhelm and obliterate thousands of Africans. The machine gun was a revolutionary gun that could fire rapid shots at an unparalleled speed. The effectiveness of the weapon was obvious in Sudan, where a British force, armed with roughly 20 machine guns and a small number of gunboats, overpowered Sudanese forces and effectively opened the door for colonization. But the Europeans, in their quest to carve up the continent, would encounter resistance. By the early 1880s, Abyssinia, or modern-day Ethiopia, was in danger of invasion from the British, French, and Italians. Abyssinia's emperor made a decision to exploit European rivalries. After minor concessions to France in return for weapons, Italy grew nervous of the growing French interest in the country and offered the emperor Italian weapons. Throughout the 1880s, Abyssinia grew stronger and stronger, securing more modern weapons from the British and Russians. In 1889, Italy claimed Abyssinia as an Italian protectorate. The emperor rejected this. Italy, craving the glory of victory, ordered its troops into battle in 1894. Outnumbered, the Italians were defeated, and in 1896, Abyssinia remained independent. The British encountered resistance in South Africa against the Boers. They had previously recognized the independence of the Boer republics, but the discovery of diamonds and the potential of a German-Boer alliance led to war. The Boers used guerrilla warfare and utilized their skills of marksmanship to hinder British advancement, but in the end, British forces prevailed. Great Britain dominated the African continent with the control of Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, and the Gold Coast. The French occupied vast expanses of West Africa. The Germans controlled modern-day Tanzania, as well as Namibia. The Italians controlled Somalia and Libya, whilst the Portuguese exerted full control over Angola and Mozambique. By 1914, 90% of Africa had been divided between 7 European countries, with only Ethiopia and the African-American state of Liberia remaining independent nations. This video has been a collaboration with 26 other history channels on the history of Africa. Check out the previous video by History and Headlines with his video on Timbuktu.
Okay, so do you think it was fair for European countries to decide in Europe, at the Berlin Conference, was it fair for them to decide which countries should own certain lands on another continent in Africa? Isn't it a bit strange that mostly 7 countries decided that, okay, I will take Central Africa, okay, I will take South Africa, I will take West and North Africa, but who gave them the right to decide this? Okay, had you been given a say at the Berlin Conference, what would you have told the representatives of those European countries there? Think, you can spend like 5 minutes to think and give me your ideas for a speech, okay? So press pause, think, and then share your ideas. As for now, we're going on. Now, important thing for you to know is that in the 19th century, Europe's nations decided to colonize and control different parts of Africa to obtain its natural resources for their industries. Only by the 1970s, most of East Africa had regained its independence from Europe. So, for about 100 years, those countries were working for Europe and for European for the benefit of Europe. Okay, now when you look at these two pictures that I gave you on this page, okay, which picture best represents what really happened at the Berlin Conference? Okay, so the photograph or this caricature, this cartoon? Okay, the photograph shows you a bunch of civilized officials, representatives from different countries, or probably diplomats and even kings or people close to kings. They're in this beautiful hall and they're discussing in a civilized way, in civilized manner, how they are going to deal with this African continent. While in the cartoon you can see the same people, okay, cutting a cake into pieces, and the cake's name is Africa. So, which picture represents what happened there better? I don't know, like you say, but I believe that caricature, or this cartoon, shows the real situation. Okay, now you can read more about colonization in Africa on pages 432, 433, and now we are going to the modern day East Africa, and we will start with East African economy. How do you think, like just right now, think about everything you know about Africa, especially East Africa, if you know something about that place. Okay, so what is East African economy based on? No ideas? Then, okay, read about it on pages 433, 434, and tell me what are the main two branches of East African economy. One of the branches is farming. Okay, so you can read about it on page 433. Another branch is tourism, right? Okay, and now knowing what you know from the book, from the text that you've just read, okay, so can you please give me any ideas of what might be the benefits and drawbacks of these economic activities in Africa? So they can be benefits and drawbacks for people, nature, I don't know, like country itself, or whatever. Okay, so for example, what might be the benefits of farming? Of course, look, African soil is very fertile, and actually some people believe that you can just stick a dry branch into this soil and it gives root and starts growing and bring fruit. Okay, so because the fertile is that good, so the soil is that good, that fertile. Okay, now what might, so it means technically that actually farming can bring a lot of fruit, and fruit may bring a lot of money from export, because you can send that fruit to different countries, to Europe, to America, to like even to your countries. Okay, so now what might be the drawbacks of farming? Any ideas? The drawbacks of farming? Actually, the more people want to grow, the more land they need to turn into farms. The more land they turn into farms, the less land is left for the wildlife in Africa. Isn't it so? So, to produce more fruit, to organize more farms, people have to rob wild animals of their territories. Okay, what might be the benefits of tourism in Africa? Indeed, again, money, income, the general state income for many countries depends on tourism. Like, for example, in Kenya, in Tanzania, many people come there just for visiting savannas, for these tours to see wild nature and animals and everything. And again, the drawback is there too, because these countries, these people, these tourists, when they come and visit those parks, those savannas, so there is always risk that they will destroy the habitat of, again, the wild animals. Okay, and another thing, as tourism is growing and the touristic sector is growing, more and more people from Europe, from America, from other countries come to see African sites, and with them they bring their own culture. And of course, touristic agencies, when they want to bring people from different places, they must give them something which will make them feel comfortable in those countries. Okay, and again, it means they will have to build European type restaurants. They will have to build hotels that are more like European, and this make African country a part of the global world. And it means that the culture of Africa is getting less and less powerful in that continent, because globalization brings a lot of European trends, American trends, and slowly those people there in Africa, they lose their traditions, they lose their cultures, and they become more and more like European people, like American people, like, okay, I can't say that they're like Russian people, but again, a lot of Arabian influence is there as well. Okay, so technically you go there, you want to see Africa and African culture, but you go there and you see a lot of European stuff and American stuff and even Arabian stuff. So technically, the tourism and globalization destroy local cultures, even though on the other hand, this globalization and the internet allow the countries to share their cultural values to a wider, bigger number of people. Okay, so now look, human-environment interaction, and at home, by the way, you're going to read the chapter about human-environment interaction in Africa. So, but now we're talking about East Africa. Watch this video and tell us how intensive farming has affected the wildlife in East Africa, and can this situation be redressed or corrected? So, how has intensive farming affected the life of gorillas in East Africa? First of all, farms robbed gorillas of their natural habitat, their territories. Okay. Second, gorillas have come to close contact with people, right? And this close contact, first, it brought the attention of poachers. Poachers are people who hunt animals illegally, kill them, or just catch them and sell them as wild animals to other countries, like alive animals, to zoos or like entertainment parks or something. Okay, so these are poachers. And another thing, close contact with people. In this close contact with people, gorillas were affected by human diseases. Yes, and many gorillas died because their immune system is not ready to fight those diseases. Because actually, gorillas can can catch many of the diseases that we people have. Okay, so what can be done in this situation? Okay, so something is being done by the companies, by funds and special associations. They raise money in different parts of the world and bring the money to Africa to build special small parks, and in those parks they keep those gorillas secluded from people. Okay, and it saves their population. So right now we have only 800 of those beautiful animals on the African continent and in the world. Now, another problem. We'll watch this video and you will tell me how human activity has affected the life of the elephants in East Africa, and can this situation be mended or again redressed, corrected?
East to Rome.
So, how has human activity affected the life of these poor elephants? First of all, the roads and farms cut the elephants from their traveling routes. Okay, so if before elephants were traveling almost all across the continent, going south and north, and if it was drought in some area they could go to another area where it was wet and rainy and they could feed there. So now with all those roads that people built, with all the farmlands and everything, elephants found themselves cut in the area, and if the drought is there, they cannot go to any other places around the continent. Okay, so and now the solution, one of the small solutions, is this little underways, the road for elephants under the car roads here. So elephants can use these ways at least to continue migrating from one place to another on the surface of the continent. Okay, so now we're going to discuss some cultural differences in Africa, and the most important cultures in East Africa for us will be the Maasai and the Kikuyu. Okay, you can read about these cultures on pages 434, 435, and please make sure you don't miss the box at the top of the page that says growing up in Kenya. Okay, and right now these are Maasai too. Okay, so what's so special about them? Look at their clothes. They look beautifully red and checkered, and colorful clothes. Okay, and also Kikuyu. And I told you in the beginning of the lesson last week that for me Africa means colors because of their clothes as well, not only because of the flowers or animals or whatever, but also because of their colorful clothes. So okay, so these are the photographs I took in Africa when I was there. So these are Kikuyu people, and Mukangu is one of the villages 2,000 meters high in the mountains. Okay, and people live there, these Kikuyu people. Okay, now you can read more about them, as I said, on pages 434, 435. And now another human environment interaction question for you. Now you will watch this video. How have the Maasai people changed their tradition to prevent lions from extinction? And before you start watching, I need to tell you something about special tradition for Maasai people. Maasai people live in the savannas of Africa. They're very tall. They are normally like 180 centimeters, 200, 210 centimeters tall, okay, and they can jump high and run very fast. And for those people living there in savannah, their cattle is their main source of food and, if possible, income. So because sometimes they may sell their cattle as well. Okay, so which means they must take care of their cattle a lot. And sometimes it happens that lions come and start hunting their cattle. And it was like for centuries, for hundreds of years, for probably thousands of years, that for Maasai, for Maasai boy to become a man, there was a special ceremony. In this ceremony, a boy had to go to savannah and kill a lion. And after killing this lion, he was considered to be a man grown. And it was a tradition, and it was a must for every boy, or like sometimes when there were not enough lions, 2 or 3 boys going together hunting one lion. And but this lion hunt was very, very important for them. Okay, but in the 20th century, with all the changes in nature, with all those tourists and poachers roaming across African surface, the number of lions decreased dramatically. And nowadays, it is not enough. The number of lions is not enough for all the Maasai boys to become men. Okay, so and now the Maasai people have changed their tradition. So now, how have the Maasai people changed their tradition to prevent lions from extinction? In 2011, Kenyan government officially forbade the traditional Maasai lion hunt, which means today lions are not killed by the boys who want to become men in the Maasai land. Okay, on the contrary, lions are protected by those boys, and to become a man nowadays in Africa for these Maasai people means that they need to find a lion they would like to protect. Now, we are done for the day, and here comes your homework. First of all, you may revise about East Africa on pages 431, 435, but if you don't want, you may skip pages about healthcare in modern Africa, because there will be special lesson in which we will talk about healthcare in Africa. So the last part of this chapter about healthcare is not a must. Also, from pages 424, 427, you will learn more about human-environment interaction in Africa. You will read these pages, okay? So, because as I said before, this human-environment interaction in Africa, this unit, this chapter, is your homework. And also important thing, make sure that you are able to find East Africa and the countries it includes on the following blank map. You remember the blank maps that we studied before in the beginning of the class? Okay, now you have another blank map here, and you need to find these countries on this map as well. If you fail to do so, if you cannot remember the countries and their names, please refer back to page 430 in your book. Thank you for your attention, and hope to see you next week. Bye!